coming up in this episode.
The American founders I speak to, they get what we're doing straight away. They understand it. They see the importance of it. They're very, what I would call disciplined as well. They're the ones who are first in the waiting room and last off the calls.
The fact is that the reality from those looking in from the outside, whether they're friends, family, investors, customers, whatever, that if you don't actually spend a couple of hours or more every week focusing on the two things that matter most, which is you, your own role and your business, and you don't focus those from a different perspective, then you're increasingly less likely to have success.
I don't know why, but over the last 10 years, less than the last year or so, there's been a real focus on fundraising. And sometimes when you look at it, Gregory, fundraising could be the most expensive way to finance a business. So there's lots of other opportunities without diluting your stake in the business, and different ways of doing it. So always look at options.
The Founders Unplugged podcast, hosted by Greg McCallum. Raw, uncensored conversations with startup founders.
How have you been?
All good.
Yeah.
Busy. Not enough hours in the day.
Yeah.
Looking to get away. Can't wait. Need to have some R&R and chill out. But yeah,
Where are you
good.
thinking of going to?
We'll probably head down to the Indian Ocean somewhere.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Warm seas and warm weather, hopefully, which is what we need in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, we're getting there. Fair enough. You mentioned that you might be having a colleague join. I know Gary was initially going to. Is he jumping along as well, or?
Yeah, Gary isn't that well at the moment. He's got this cold he can't shake. So we're going to be joined by Harry Wyndham at 11:30. Harry is an absolute encyclopedia of knowledge. He's been involved in lots of startups, great entrepreneur, fantastic raconteur. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he'll be with us around 11:30.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
We'll talk in more depth, Greg, if that's okay. Yeah. About why we felt inclined and really sort of needed to set up Startup to Stand-Up. Yeah. And what our thought process was back in 2020.
Yeah. Okay. Well, sounds good. Well, let's kick things off by doing sort of what I always do, which is it's just the introductory part, right? So, like I always say, it's about the only bit of structure I have in this show, which is like to put the spotlight on you, and just if I could ask you to introduce yourself and your business to those listening and watching, especially for those that aren't familiar with you and Startup to Stand Up, it could be very useful. So take it away.
Well, I'm Ollie Austen. I'm one of the co-founders of Startup to Stand Up. I first want to say, Greg, that I'm delighted to be on here with you. And I wanted to say as well, you've got a great name in the founders ecosystem. You do a lot of good work promoting.
Thank you.
And to the benefit of founders all round. I think anyone who does this type of thing is wonderful. And you did that wonderful talk to Startup to Stand Up members a few months ago, and we very much enjoyed it and got a lot from it. So thank you very much, Greg.
Well, no, my pleasure, and thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun, and I hope to join again soon when time allows. Yeah, it was really great meeting people, and yeah, I appreciate you inviting me on. So thank you.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. So about me, working class kid, went from school, ended up in the city and spent a long time there, trading, broking, financial futures and options. And then came out of that late 20s, I think, and then set up my first business with a co-founder. We run that for the best part of 20 years, exited. We started together, just the two of us. And on exit, we had short of 100 staff. Learned a lot, learned an awful lot. and sat there one day and thinking, well, got to either write a book as a guide and help and do's and don'ts for other founders, or have something which is a little bit more active, progressive than just a book that is out of date once the ink's dry. And I joined Vistage in 2015, and that's the world's largest peer-to-peer group for founders, CEOs. Fantastic organisation. And we're in a Vistage meeting just before lockdown, late 2019, early 2020. It's like, peer to peer is everything. It really is. And you've seen how we work, Greg. Our members get from it. And there's not really much out there for founders. And it's founders who carry all the risk, all of the guarantees, all of it's carried by founders. And when you realize that founders are the wealth creators, they create jobs for people in our economy. I think SMEs are responsible for 61% of all jobs in the UK economy. And what help do they get? So we started Startup to Stand Up, and it's grown organically. We love the members. We're blessed with the hosts we got. We got on a Tuesday night, that's hosted by Matt Meyer, who's a wonderful individual. Wednesday morning, we've got Gareth Hawkins, who I think you know Gareth, don't you?
I believe so.
Well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And on a Thursday lunchtime, it's hosted by Stacey, and she's an American female founder. So they're all very different. They've all got their own talents and individual qualities. But wow, we're blessed to have them on board, and all the other team at Startup to Stand Up is fantastic. It's all about the members, Greg. It's all about them. They come to us every week, every meeting, and we don't know what we're going to get. It's not like Prime Minister's Question Times when we get primed in advance. We know what was going to be asked, and that's the beauty of it, the spontaneity. That's where the juice is, the value of the founders, because they're in a room, a virtual room, once, twice, 3 times a week, wherever they want, and they can talk to other founders, different sectors, different verticals. And I would say that if you look at our membership across the board, it's probably 70% tech founders we got, but we've got every vertical. Everything's in there. And if we had a room just full of first-time founders in prop tech, that'd be brilliant. But it wouldn't work in terms of getting the answers, getting the responses, getting the ideas and the solutions for questions, because it's that diversity that brings the richness.
It's that true diversity, right? It's diversity of thoughts and diversity of experience that really brings it together. Yeah, and I felt that definitely when I was there the other week. So yeah, you got that's a good point, because you've got the first time founders. I've got a young guy, I think he's still at uni. I think he's doing his finals soon, and he's very young, first time founder, absolute genius, and he's joined. And he said he's joined because he's young, but he's no idea how to run a business. And that's why he wants to rub shoulders. The flip side of that, we've got members who have had multiple exits. And I suppose they're there to add something back. But at the same time, what I get from them is they learn every week, Greg. They're learning, picking up stuff. It's, they're picking up so much knowledge themselves that it's just I call it an ideas and solutions exchange with founders. That's if I had to sum it up, that's what it is. I mean, this is why I think you and I connected so quickly when we first spoke, because we shared very similar philosophies here, right? Which is that founders best off learning from other founders. Founders should speak with other founders, right? Number one. And number two, the reason why we both love founders and we are founders is because of this constant desire to learn and to improve and to be better, than you were yesterday. It's like this 1% better every day kind of thing. And that mindset, when you put people together that are like that, like everything's possible. When you get a bunch of people together in a room who all have that mindset that you can literally like accomplish anything, and because ego just it gets parked, out at the front door. It's like you said, multiple X's under the belt. It doesn't matter. I've still got stuff to learn, because we all do.
Absolutely. Greg, I speak to anything between 80 to 100, if not more, founders a month in my various businesses. Now, I would say those who are looking to join Startup to Stand Up, we've got a strict door policy and criteria. Now, the criteria is just basically what you covered. So you have to be ambitious. We need to see a propensity in you that you want to grow and scale your business. That's key. That you're willing to learn and develop yourself as a business leader. That's very, very important. And also the ability to the sort of appetite to want to help others. That's really important. And there's a percentage that don't meet the criteria for whatever reason. We make good members or not? Well, we're not sure, but we have to keep the standards high. We really do.
Yeah, and I think that's a reasonable request, like a set of requests. If you want to foster the kind of culture that you want to foster within these groups, essentially, like it makes sense. And unfortunately, there are founders out there that I've encountered them, you've encountered them, that they think they know everything already. So there's not much you can do with that, right? But do you feel like, the motivation for creating this kind of thing, you mentioned it was like, okay, well, we had some success, now we should talk about it. But was it more, we want to share, and there was an altruistic aspect to this, but was there also maybe like a almost slightly selfish aspect, in a sense, like still altruistic, but like, I wish we had this when we were, coming up and going through this, and also, we can learn from this. Like, there must have presumably been that kind of angle to it too, right? Because of what the resources that were available to you when you maybe first started must have been far less than what there is now.
Well, absolutely. And I suppose the way I see it, and it's a very, very good point and observation, Greg, the way I see it is when I was first starting in the sort of pre-2000 times, there was nothing really around for founders at that point. There wasn't the peer-to-peer movement there is today, and that's cool. As a founder, you were stuck really with like advisors, expensive advisors, or costly nets, and we went through a lot. We went through them. We had lots of different advisors and consultants and all of that. And sometimes you've got to really worry if they've got your back and they understand your business and they've got empathy with you as founders. They understand what makes you tick. A lot of the time, advisors will say the right things, but their intention and their motives are very different. They often not want to extend their stay. So they'll take you down a rabbit hole, which takes months and months and months. They will often have really, really expensive day rates and not be willing to put anything on the back end, performance related. That sometimes is a big sign. But that really, when we started, was only the real thing that we could turn to: expensive day rate advisors as founders. Then I found Vistage, around 2015, 2016, and my worldview changed because all of a sudden, Greg, I had access to all of these wonderful business leaders, people who run FTSE 250 companies, big corporates, some very successful founders. And I was in the room rubbing shoulders with these people on a regular basis. And it was like, wow. And they didn't have an axe to grind. They weren't trying to push me in a certain direction. And best still, it was at a fraction of the cost. And I was getting better quality feedback. Output was off the charts. And just awe-inspiring. I would just listen to these great people talking about their different problems and the way they overcome and staff and all of the things you could count as the main business issues and growth, scale, whatever, finance, HR, and I learned so much. And I was like, why wasn't this around 15 years ago?
Right. It's interesting. A couple of things you mentioned there because of very similar experience to you as but as an advisor, we're surrounded by advisors doing that kind of thing. Really disillusioned me with being an advisor, and I was like, I maybe need to stop being an advisor. I could, it didn't sit well with me. It didn't feel like I was part of a crowd that had, the best reputation and necessarily always doing it for the right reasons. Like you said, often trying to bring people down rabbit holes to just extend their contracts, not really having a solid exit strategy, not really having any skin in the game. And instead of quitting, remember when we first spoke, I told you kind of my philosophy on this a few years ago. I was like, right, just change the business model, just rip it all apart. That's why I did the pay as you scale retainer plans and work with some element of equity to show that I care. And, and the whole no bullshit approach, which is kind of my brand as well. Just being like, you don't need me, have 1 hour and you should, I want to make myself redundant. Like that's the point. And so I completely get that. That really resonates with me. And I'm glad to see that other people, I think, are seeing what I'm doing and thinking, yeah, maybe he's onto something.
I really am a believer in this. And I think what you said earlier, founders learn best from other founders.
Right.
And exited founders who have been, gone again. It might be their fourth or fifth time.
Mm.
They also can see in that founder who needs help, needs mentoring, needs guidance. They can see they're not to be exploited.
Mm.
They're not to be, because I was there once. We're not gonna exploit you. We're not gonna charge you £1,000 a day or £1,200 a day, whatever it is, to come in and give you some sort of abstract information that may or may not be good for your business. Yeah,
right. Something just copy and pasted out of some
just
text
really complex. And that's why we found we come some really good advice. We had some really wonderful consultants, all right, who helped us learn and moved us on, and they were responsible for that. They did well, but in the main, I felt that advisors were a lot of them were academic. They were from the corporate world. They certainly didn't understand what made us tick as founders. They didn't understand that. They didn't have the sort of experience and stuff. And this is why the peer-to-peer. If you get a group of founders in the room together, and they want to be there, and they're intent on being ambitious, wanting to grow, wanting to develop, all right. And we have a lot of things come up around investor relations. Well, if you was a founder, if you was in a good co-founding team, and you had some tricky investors, where are you going to go to get help on that? Correct. Where would you go?
Yeah. Well, you can't speak to your team. You can't affect confidence internally in your organization. You could maybe speak with your executive team if you have one, and you have the confidence to but again, you could shake confidence there. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like, what are the options? Yeah.
And since the sort of bear run in the funding environment happened, and we're seeing more and more predatory, ominous term sheets coming out, being produced, and some are ridiculous. And we see all this, and term sheets coming across that really are taking advantage. If you was a founder without a peer-to-peer network, how would you know if that was standard or not?
Right.
To have that safe and secure peer-to-peer group community. That's what we call it, founders community, where you can talk about these things with your fellow founders, and they'll go, hold on a minute, what they've offered you, that's bullshit. Yeah.
There's another really clear advantage I see from all this as well, which is, I remember when I was, first starting out, and I'm sure it was the same for you and many others, that you kind of idolize founders, seasoned founders, especially successful founders, however you would categorize that, to a point where you this is often where the sort of the imposter sort of syndrome kind of kicks in and all that, and so it's really only when sitting in a room, like you mentioned, where you suddenly were able to get the opportunity to sit in a room with these people and rub shoulders with them, it humanizes them, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, we're all the same, we're all the same, we all have the same worries, the same inadequacies, the concerns, that everything, we all have that, like, and I think that's a really important thing in speaking to other founders that we don't talk about often enough. And it's actually kind of really one of the main motivations of doing this show, is to show everyone, like, yes, they can be like an extremely successful guest I have on this show, but when in talking to them, they went through the shit. They still struggle with these kinds of concerns or worries and, self-doubts, and, and I think that's a really important thing to let people know. It's like, these people, we're not all untouchable. Like, just what you see on LinkedIn isn't a proper evaluation of what's actually occurring behind the scenes. And I think that makes people feel better,
There's not many great founders I know who were an overnight success.
Right.
Even in my own experience, I've had extreme highs and extreme lows, and willing to always share them, talk about them in the setting of Startup to Stand Up, and have people, one-to-ones and say, look, it's fine. You're going to have these anxieties. You're going to have these ups and downs. That's what it's about. But it's also about staying in the game. Yeah. Being in the game, staying there until you've satisfied the targets that you want to set out when you set out to do this. It's all about resilience, and that's why we partnered with Mindful last year. They're the guys who do a wonderful podcast. They've got a podcast. They're doing a lot in the founders' welfare, mental health, and we've done probably about 5 or 6 different workshops. They've covered money. They've covered resilience. They've covered all of the main points in their workshops for founders, and their members absolutely love it. And they're doing sort of one-to-one ones with members, and just airing it, Greg, talking about it makes it fun. You look at what happened to Richard Branson a few years ago. Everyone thinks Richard Branson's and he is. He's a fantastic founder, brilliant entrepreneur, but he still has day-to-day issues, and it's not all plain sailing. And it never will be. And it's fine to actually recognize that and talk about it and air it. And it's when you do that, you sort of halve the problem. A wonderful quote I heard was, and I'm going to probably mess it up for you, Greg, but it goes along something like, alone we can go fast, but together we can go further. Yeah. Mm. I spoke to a founder about a month ago, and he's building this incredible Web3 product. Okay. Very techy. He's had a series of other successes in the past. And I said to him, how do you work? And he's joined Startup to Stand Up recently. He said, Ollie, I'm doing 14, 16 hours a day on my own in my flat. I think he's in the southeast somewhere. And I haven't spoke to a human. You're the first human I've spoke to in 2 days. Mm. Now think about that. He's working 6 days a week, 14, 16 hours a day. He's not getting the human contact. So him being now able to come in once, twice, 3 times a week to start stand-up meetings, and also have educational talks, because we put on 6 to 7 talks a month and guest speakers on every topic you can think of, business related. It's like the tonic for him. That's what he needs.
It's a lifeline.
Yeah. It's a lifeline. Mm. It's a lifeline.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so important. And, you made a good comment earlier, Greg. Said a lot of founders, they seem to think they know it all. And, I do come across people like that. They're not, maybe not for us, because, they're sometimes unwilling to give, and everything's rosy, everything's perfect. It's like what you see on LinkedIn. Everything's it's almost like an airbrush 80s soap opera in America. Yeah, it's just all too perfect. A sort of a Dallas Dynasty type setup. So it's never going to be like that.
Yeah.
Even the biggest and the best founders, there's always turbulence. And if you've got your tribe together, and that tribe is helping you overcome this turbulence here and there, and maybe some structural damage, and maybe some mechanical issues, or whatever it is, financials, operations, sales, you're gonna find the solutions and ideas from that.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the technical founder there, because I can imagine, especially for technical founders, it's particularly hard, because the amount of time that they put into building the business is, it's in the early stages especially, it's very intense, right? They're building, and often, technical founders I speak to, as I'm sure you've come across too, are building alongside a full-time job, and so they are just non-stop focused on building something, whether it's their own thing or something for someone else. And the time for learning about how to get started, what skills they need to develop to be a leader, a CEO, a founder, just that there's no time for that, right? Let alone time for socializing and all of that. I found especially those founders tend to be the ones that are most isolated from the world and so on. And of course, that puts them at a huge disadvantage by the time their product is ready, because they've had no opportunity to build a network. That means they have lower chances of being able to secure investment, lower chances of being able to go to market. Like, there's just so many, so many negatives to that. And then, of course, for those that are non-technical, while they tend to be a little bit better at going out and networking early on, the opposite is true. It's like they're not able to find the time to focus on actually very meaningful conversation, and distinguishing between meaningful networking and conversation with the right people versus I just need to speak to everyone to get awareness up. So it's interesting how these different profiles will get probably very different things, but ultimately it's a kind of a net positive regardless, right?
Well, it's a good point, because we had the wonderful Dave Plunkett come on and do a talk recently. Dave Plunkett from Collaboration Junkie. And he talked about your network is your net worth, yeah, and how important it is. And we had a founder who was doing some beta testing, and he asked if we could, review stuff and pull it out to the wider network and communities. Now, if you're just that guy on your own, working all them hours a day, and at the expense of building network, which is as important, that tribe, you're really not going to get much feedback, are you? The feedback's going to be certainly undermined.
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose one other, I mean, there's obviously a ton of benefits to what you're doing, but I suppose one other that's just sprung to mind as well is the accessibility for those that are in areas that are considered otherwise isolated, right? For the longest time, it's always been said that if you're going to be a founder, you need to be in a capital, right? So in the UK, it's like, unless you're in London, you basically don't exist. You're not going to raise money, you're not going to gain traction, etc. And of course, that's changed over the last few years dramatically. And I think for the better, meaning that people don't need to uproot their lives and move to London and pay ridiculous amounts to live in a tiny one-bed, flat. They can still have the same networking experiences like wherever they live. It could be somewhere in the remote Highlands, and they can still, like you said, rub shoulders with, FTSE, top tier operators and CEOs. And I think that really, and I'm all about that leveling of the playing field and the sort of democratization of things. So that's another distinct advantage, I guess, isn't it?
Advantage. And we've got members of our community like that. You know, they're in the most remote places, and then I've got our one of our latest American members is coming, and I think he's in San Diego in California, but he gets as much out of the sort of network. We're learning loads of him. He's an AI guru. He really does. He does a lot of talks in the US about AI. Huge expert in all of that, and he benefits. We benefit. Yeah, but he's all them miles away, and we've got so many members who are, you know, in Norfolk, all over in very remote parts of the UK and Europe. So you're absolutely correct there.
So let's, if you'll indulge me, let's turn the clock back a little bit. You mentioned obviously about your past and your previous startup. Can you tell me a bit more about the startup, or tell us a bit more about the startup? Like, what was it? What was the business?
Yeah. I can tell you, it was a business that we created. Two of us started it. It was many different businesses under one roof. Okay. So we had lots of different offerings, different products, but ultimately, it became, the biggest part of it, I suppose, was two parts: the project side. So we did a lot of work for main contractors, big corporates, and we also had a healthcare laundry that served some NHS hospitals. Is Harry?
Hello, Harry. Nice to meet you.
Hi, yeah.
A lot of the private sector hospitals as well, and that was run from central London. And we'd also developed a number of patented products that were being sold directly into the NHS and overseas as well. We built quite a successful export division, and yeah, that's still going today, strength to strength.
Right, wonderful. Hello, Harry. Lovely to meet you.
Hi, Greg. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks. Thanks for joining us.
Not at all. I'm sorry I'm a bit late.
No, not at all. Not a problem. It's given Ollie and I an opportunity to kind of to lay the foundations, as it were. So it's not a problem. And we've just been speaking at length about the value, I suppose, of the organisation, and yeah, we're just delving a little bit into Ollie's past. But as you've just joined us, do you mind if I put the spotlight over to you and ask you to introduce yourself and tell us all a bit more about what you do?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Harry Wyndham, and one of the things I do is to help Ollie with Startup to Standup. Is that I have grown and sold a number of businesses over the years, and I am now a founder again. I'm a co-founder and shareholder in 3 companies, including Startup to Standup, actually. And I also supposedly have other jobs looking after businesses which I'm not an owner of and things like that. So I suppose I'm reasonably busy for somebody as elderly as myself. A portfolio career, and from what I read the paper this morning, increased chances of avoiding dementia and Alzheimer's because I keep myself busy. So I suppose I've got a bit to be grateful for, Greg.
That sounds great. And you just said you've become a founder again. Is that right? Is that what you just mentioned there? So,
yeah, I mean,
when it was venture.
Yeah, a few years back, I started a renewable energy business with a friend of mine who had sold his industrial business and wanted to start again. So we did that. That is now, I'm pleased to say, reasonably way down the pike, is that we built and we own and operate 5 renewable generating stations, and we're trying to build another one at the moment. And we've also built 3 solar parks, but we've always sold those essentially to pay down the debt of the existing business and to try and get a bit more money to build some more if any opportunities come around. So that's one of them. And I'm a sort of co-founder, of shareholder and chairman, actually, or chair, sorry, of an ag tech business, which has operations, growing operations in France and Canada, and builds UV lights and ag tech facilities in China. So those are the other things really I do, apart from the startup to stand-up founders role, but I also chair 3 groups of sort of more larger company CEOs, owners, and founders as part of the Vistage program. So the support for leaders, which I always think has been very important and wish I'd had more of when I started, is something I'm very much involved with and love doing it in the Startup to Stand-up forum.
And that's an interesting statement there as well at the end. We were just touching on that, that was kind of the catalyst for Startup to Stand Up. It seems that it was very much, this is what we would have wanted when we started out, and that seems to be a common theme with a lot of people I speak to, who are somewhat altruistic with their knowledge and sort of against the gatekeeping aspect of it. It seems to be very much born out of that place of, this is what I would have wanted, this is what I needed, and that's a good way to give back. It seems so. That's great. So what is it that you do in Startup to Stand Up exactly? Like how do you help? You mentioned you help, but how, in what forms does that tend to take?
Probably not enough, if you ask Ollie, Greg.
Okay.
When we had our first drop-in surgeries, as we call them, when people just come in on Zoom and talk about whatever they want for an hour, and then arrange other hookups beyond that. And often it can take the form of asking for advice, or sometimes it's just catharsis, as we know, when people are telling us about all the ghastly things that have happened and what they should do about it. I sort of emceed. I chaired the first of those, until we got other members who were better, younger, more experienced, altogether more capable of doing that. So I started doing that, and I'm now, I suppose, helping to develop it further, grow the business, because it's growing rapidly. There's a lot of demand for membership of organizations like that, as you know better than I do, Greg. So I'm trying to help expand it even further, and we have, we'll be opening up in other countries as well, because there are lots of founders, entrepreneurs, small businesses, or whatever we want to call them, that need that support in other countries too. So, yeah, yes, and you're quite right. It is, a lot of it. If I think the first couple of businesses I started, if I'd had the ability to talk to people regularly who were completely unconnected and didn't have any particular, any particular view which wasn't completely objective, I know we would have got there much earlier, and I wouldn't have made half the mistakes that I did. But I suppose one of the good things about making so many mistakes is I hope I've learned from them. But we'll have to see, won't we?
Well, it is one of the slightly one of the things, I suppose, that sometimes counters this idea of giving advice, and I've certainly experienced this too a lot as an advisor myself when speaking to people, is that sometimes you can give the advice with the best intentions, but ultimately people do have to learn from making the mistake themselves. Yeah. Which is often the case. So, whenever someone asks me what I do for a living, I tend to say I get paid to be ignored for a living, which is probably a good description of it. But no, but at least it can give you a framework to hang your hat on, right? But it brings me very nicely to what I wanted to start asking about anyway before you jumped on, which was what the future plans are for Startup to Stand Up, because of Startup to Stand Up, because I'm interested to know, and it does feel very much like that's the next natural progression, especially given that I know that you are getting interest from overseas already, and so the demand is clearly already there. So is that part of the main strategy, and what else is maybe on the cards for things moving forwards? And this is open to both of you.
Before we answer that, Greg, I want to just say that Harry's being far too modest,
right,
about contribution to Start to Stand Up, because when someone comes in and they raise something, and it's about getting the variance and the room and getting all types of input. Generally, when Harry puts his hand up, you can see a lot of relief, and Harry's wonderful, and very charitable with knowledge, and generous. And I just wanted to add that. So we're all very, very different. There's 3 of us who founded Startup to Stand Up. We're all exited founders, but that's where the similarity ends, I think. We Gary is our the co-founder as well. He was one of the original co-founders of Halo, free now, the taxi app. And yeah, it's very, very different, but that's what it's all about, that diversity thing.
It goes back to that diversity of thought and diversity of experience that we talked about, right? Which is makes sense. But
so you want to know about our
the future?
Future,
yeah.
World domination,
Of course.
I think, isn't it, Harry? That's what's on the agenda. You caught us a good time, Greg. A very, very good time, because we're about to launch our own platform that's going to go out later this month.
Okay.
It's really going to be significant for members. It's going to improve the member experience, connectivity. It's going to be access to our full video library resource. So we've got a video library now. I think it's around 400 or 500 separate videos on every business topic you can conceivably think of. So if you are struggling, for instance, with the sales process or B2B networking, wherever it's fundraising, how to attract investment from angel investors, you can have direct access to the library and get some very, very interesting information and tidbits, which will hopefully make a difference. So that's going to be, that's probably the immediate thing which we're looking to do. But we've got so much more planned and being rolled out, including some big moves in the US as well. Because it's everyone.
I was going to ask, can you speak more about that, or are they sort of a little bit? And also, just for context as well, for those listening, we obviously record these episodes in advance. So by the time this is airing, that platform will most likely be live. If you're saying next month, this is probably going to come out around then. So actually, I'll be able to include the links and stuff and such into the description. So, but yeah, are you able to speak more on the plans you have in the States, or are they a little bit with are you keeping those cards to your chest a little bit?
Well, what we find, Greg, is to be honest, when I speak to American founders, and there's not much over there which is similar to Startup to Stand Up. Maybe here and there, but not in authentic terms. You know, it's more of a networking. It's more like the sort of BMI model of bring 5 leads to the local plumber every week and that type of thing. We're not. It's nothing like that. The American founders I speak to, they get what we're doing straight away. They understand it. They see the importance of it. They're very, what I would call disciplined as well. They're the ones who are first in the waiting room and last off the calls. They try to.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like and subscribe with notifications turned on.
To absorb as much knowledge, and the ones who come to you after the meetings and ask for like umpteen intros. I think they get it a lot quicker than maybe the UK. I mean, that's a generalization, but it's what we see.
That's interesting as well, because I literally had a call before I came on here with a sales leader. As similar to you guys, I speak to people all the time from all different walks of life. It's just part of what I do. And we were having a conversation about the approach in the US versus the UK, and how the US approach often doesn't translate very well over to the UK when it comes to business. But the UK approach, when one that works well has been found, it can translate well, because there's something about the authenticity and approach that we have in the UK, which is a little bit more raw, and sometimes plays to our inclination to tilt more towards self-deprecation and things like that seems to appeal and resonate quite well in the UK. And it's interesting that you mentioned that slightly to an extent there, because there is, kind of going back to what we were saying about LinkedIn, this kind of this this desire to almost embrace positivity porn, as I like to call it in the US, which doesn't really do anyone any favors because it's not really.
I think you're being far too generous with that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
How would you term it?
Well, is this going out to children as well?
Well,
Gregory?
no, but I mean, I don't imagine any children's going to be particularly interested in these topics. But it will be.
I'll tell you next time.
But I mean, if you want to swear, I don't mind. Swearing is fine. But yeah. But no, I mean, yeah, that's kind of the way I see it. But it seems like, yeah, maybe I'm being a bit too generous. But it seems to be that there's just a bit of an inclination to make everything a bit too fluffy and try and hide the struggles a little bit and try and paint a picture for more for PR reasons than anything else. Even internally in private conversation, which seems very reductive and not particularly useful. So I can imagine that, yeah, this brand that you're and this structure that you're building can appeal quite a lot because it's new, it's refreshing for them, right?
And we've been talking a lot about loneliness and isolation.
Right.
They seem to have that a lot there as well. I can't put my finger on it at the moment. I spoke to Harry and Gary about it. Is it due to the vast landmass? I don't know, but they seem to get what we do. They come in. There's a lot of enthusiasm, and yeah, they get it. They really do understand it and get it. And something else I feel we offer a vital service in at the moment. I would say in the last maybe 2 years, there seems to be a lot of unethical sharks circling around in the founders pond. Yeah, going after founders because they know they're vulnerable. They know that they're short on time, and you know, particularly when the confidence went from the fundraising market, they came out in their hordes.
Right.
Start to stand up as a good defense against that, because we regularly talk about, you know, like a rogues gallery, if you like, of consultants, advisors who will attack, and I'll use the word attack, founders, and that's so wrong. Seen a real growth in that in the last, and obviously we collect and we listen, and some of these people are like unrelenting.
Yeah. That is that you've touched on exactly what I was mentioning earlier, which is the exact reason why I changed my approach as an advisor, because I was noticing the same thing. And of course, you get lumped into the same crowd. Like you get tired of the same brush. I was like, I do not want to be associated with this lot at all. I need to do something to make very clear that I'm different from this. So yeah, I totally agree. And it definitely seemed, especially as a result of, I noticed it especially during the COVID period, right, where you know, suddenly not only were a lot of people, you know, starting startups, but then obviously we had the sort of, you know, the financial issues, the problems with, like you mentioned, investment drying up, all sorts of things happening all at the same time. There seemed then to be a huge surge out of desperation, taking advantage of the climate, whatever else it was. But I think it had been a long time coming anyway. But that definitely seemed, at least from my perspective, escalate things even further. Yeah, which is why, again, going back to when we first met, why I think we connected so quickly was because our approach is just, well, it's part of my brand, the zero bullshit kind of thing. It's like none of us got time for this shit. Like let's just be real, and if we can help each other, let's do it. Otherwise, you know, move on. And I think that kind of, just to answer to kind of go back to what you were saying there about the loneliness piece in the States. I mean, I feel like that's very much tied to what we were just talking about, that inability to be authentic. If you feel like you're constantly having to put on a bit of a performance, then, you know, really any connection you're having, it maybe doesn't feel as meaningful, and that can probably stoke that feeling more and more. So even if you are going to networking events, meeting people and so on, if you don't feel like you can be your true self, it's probably just going to make you feel further and further distance from people, not more and more connected, right? Whereas what you're doing, I could tell from when I was in one of the sessions, like people very much feel comfortable to be themselves? You know, is that something that you feel like you're doing a good job of kind of getting across to people, to just kind of, you know, let your hair down, be yourself, like this is a safe space kind of thing?
You're not going to get the support. You're not going to get the answers if you're not authentic, and if you're putting on this performance that everything's perfect and rosy in the garden. I've worked in and helped lots of founders in different businesses across different sectors, different sizes, so much in the past. Very rarely is everything all firing on all cylinders and all completely wonderful in the rose garden. There's always something, and that something can sometimes be the ultimate, killer to a business if it's not dealt with, and solutions and different options are looked at in time. And that's where we feel the Standup community helps. We help people feel comfortable, and then, you know, maybe first couple of weeks they hold back, and then they see others are willing to talk openly and be completely clear about where they are, and it's like a fever, I suppose. You know, it's a positive thing. It is a positive thing, because you go onto LinkedIn and it is like performance porn, whatever you termed it as earlier.
Positivity porn, yeah.
Positivity porn.
It's getting better, I think. It is getting better, right? At least I'm being maybe a bit more careful with the types of people I connect with too. But and I am seeing a lot more. I advise a lot of my founders, if they're going to be putting content out there,
people see through it though. Gregory.
Yeah, make it authentic, make it raw. Just be vulnerable. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, you know, if they say, oh yeah, but what about potential investors? Said, well, then they're not kind of investors you want to invest in your business anyway. It doesn't matter. Fuck them. You know, that's the way I say it. But yeah. But Harry, I'm curious to know from your perspective, because of something you said in your introduction there, just made me think of it as well, which was how do you think, what would you say to founders who maybe throw the objection to joining something like this, that they are too busy, right? Because that, I imagine that is something that you probably come across every now and then, that where they say, it sounds great, it sounds right up my alley, this is the sort of thing I need, but I just can't justify taking an hour or two out of my week to jump on these calls. How would you maybe sort of try and convince them to come over to the good side, as it were?
Well, it's a very relevant point, Greg, and I'm very sympathetic and understanding to people who do say that they can perceive at various stages in their business that they're completely overwhelmed and they can't afford to do something. The fact is that the reality, from those looking in from the outside, whether they're friends, family, investors, customers, whatever, that if you don't actually spend a couple of hours or more every week focusing on the two things that matter most, which is your own role and your business, and you don't focus those from a different perspective and just sitting behind your laptop, your desk or whatever, then you're increasingly less likely to have success. And it's interesting that if you look back through commercial history, the amount of successful entrepreneurs who did manage to step back and think differently, and often had the help of other people to do so, you know, is a very compulsive argument for it work. But I absolutely get it. You can appear overwhelmed, but if you just force yourself to do that, the benefits will come. And if you don't, the obstacles will increase. And I think we all know, I'm sure you know better than me, Greg, that it's such a difficult path. But can you not really afford to take every opportunity to make it an easier journey? And if you don't, you know, you may look back and you may regret that in times to come. So I think if there are, I mean, stand-up is one, but are there other things, whatever they are, that could help and improve your chance of success and shorten your road to success, you really owe it to yourself and your business investors, whoever, to do that. And I think you're letting all of them down if you don't take the opportunity to step back and spend an hour or more every week making sure you look at things through a different perspective.
Funny you should say that, Harry, because I was at a recent investor networking event, and I got approached by two separate investors talking to them about Startup to Stand-Up, and they both said the same thing in a sort of roundabout way, that they preferred to invest in founders that belong to, in some shape or form, to a founders community. They felt that they were better informed, that they had access to a valuable network, and they had a propensity, an appetite to learn and develop themselves as business leaders. And I suppose it is a KPI there, a measure, isn't it? So for investors, you belong to Startup.
Well, yeah, it's part of the founder profile then, isn't it? Because I mean, what might take them a very long time to be able to determine over a period of meetings and encounters of, you know, their resilience, their ability to learn and pivot and self-awareness and all these kinds of things they're trying to gauge, you can somewhat, you know, determine just by the fact that they are part of groups that require that in the first place. So, I mean, there may be a good case to putting, you know, Startup to Stand-Up on a pitch deck, to be honest, at this point, to demonstrate that to some degree.
I quite agree.
Yeah, that happens.
It has happened, and it's interestingly, a few years ago, there was a certain fund that remained nameless. You probably heard of it, Greg, that part of the conditions for investment is that you joined as pre-Startup to Stand-Up, but you had to join one of these groups of entrepreneurs, leaders, and it was separate from the fund. And they thought if you weren't involved in that, you weren't going to grow quick enough. And also you didn't get the benefit of all the other experiences, all the other issues that the other members are facing. So, you know, you dealt with things long before they hit you in the face because you probably learned them from others. And they insisted that you did that. Where it went wrong is they said, look, we can run one of these ourselves. And they ran the group, they turned the group into fund owned and fund run. And of course, nobody would speak candidly in it, because they did not want to speak the truth in front of their investors, and so it didn't work. But for a long time, it was essentially a condition of receiving money from them, and it's a very sensible thing. The fund doesn't exist anymore, so I think that's a story in itself. But yeah, it's a very worthwhile thing.
Well, it explains the value of things like accelerators as well, you know, for that exact reason, because, you know, you can be fairly certain that if a founder or a group of founders are willing to go through that experience, you know, which can be quite intense at times, and require a huge amount of commitment over a very short period of time, and have to be able to get on with a number of other individuals from all different backgrounds. I mean, again, it just tells you a lot about those individuals and you know, how easy they are to work with. And I think, and I've said this on numerous occasions in the past, but I think this is a massively underestimated thing as well, and an undervalued thing, a thing that people don't talk about enough, which is how easy are you to work with? You know, be easy to work with. Don't be difficult. You know, there's something to be said for likability, and for being easy to work with. And that's not something that I don't think is articulated particularly well across this industry, especially from investors, because it can sound, you know, somewhat a personal attack, I suppose, which is why it's not maybe a thing that's verbalized very well. But yeah, does that make sense? I think that's a quite a valuable thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. And two things on that. We tend to get quite a lot of referral from accelerators in particular, where either people will go through the cohort, they love the experience, they love the community, and when they're sort of released into the big, wide, wicked world, they want that to continue. So they'll be introduced to Startup to Stand Up. They come in as guests for 2 sessions, you know, because we can talk about it all day long, Greg, and how wonderful it is, and how we love the community. But they come in as a guest, they test drive it themselves, and then invariably they will join. That's really important. So they've still got that access to other founders. They love that whole accelerator process. The cohort was wonderful that was on. They want it to continue. So Start to Stand Up is sort of like the continuation of that, and it makes a lot of sense. And what you were saying about be nice to work with, I've got some news. So this week I was told it's confidential at the moment because they're going to be launching later in April. But 2 members of Start to Stand Up have come together. They've got a lot of experience in their own respective sectors, and they formed a company. It's like having a start-up to stand-up baby, almost. I'm so proud of that because, again, without something like Start to Stand Up, they may not have met. And piling their 2 brains together and resource together, that's going to be a success.
That's great to hear. One thing that I like to do on occasion, because again, as we've talked about, we all speak to loads of founders, and like last year alone, I think I spoke to over 500 of them. On occasion is I will meet individual founders who are working on very similar things, right? They have very similar ambitions, very similar ideas, very similar products, and it's like, why are you both building these things in isolation? Get together, put your code together, and you'll build something even better. Like, quite often you've got people building, one half of the same thing, or a quarter of the same thing. And it's just like, why end up being competitors for, of each other in the future when you could, get together now and join forces. And I think that's another huge benefit of these kinds of networking events is often and also that I think there's a mindset shift that needs to happen with founders a little bit, which is, to be open for that, to be open to, instead of meeting someone that's doing something similar to you, in these networking events and someone thinking, oh, right, well, that's going to be my future competitor. Just say, let's go for a coffee. Let's talk. Because of actually,
or they're selling slightly different things to the same audience.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's another thing. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be exactly the same thing. It could be the same market segment. And it's like, why both struggle? Offer more value to the same audience. Yeah,
that's why I think one of the most valuable and one of the most regular things we hear said in our sort of drop-in surgeries, Greg, is people say, somebody's talking about something, and somebody says, I really think you ought to call my friend Greg, or I really think you ought to speak to this person. And quite often they say, why? And they say, well, this is why you're developing similar thing. And then people say, well, I'm nervous about doing that. One of the great things of being in a group like that, and people can ask you why, and then persuade you to think again, then you go and do it, and it could change your life and could change your business or whatever. And I think it's great to do it in that circumstance. Wonderful to get a call or an email saying, I think you ought to call Greg or whatever, it could help you. But it's almost better if you get it, if you're all together in some kind of forum, it's better because you can help each other, or you can suggest that perhaps it would be a dangerous and difficult call to make, if it might be, or you can just help people go ahead and do that. And I quite agree. It's so important.
I honestly don't understand why we're not at a point now, given how many, especially if we talk about tech specifically, right? Tech solutions, SaaS solutions and stuff. I don't understand how we're not at a point now where there is just not a standard approach to integrating or, affiliating each other's technology with it. Because so much of what people build is applicable to so many others' audiences, right? I don't really see how there's not been almost an industry standard approach to that at this point, where there's a button in every one SaaS that just says affiliate products, partners, whatever, like that's just there. Like that, maybe that's something that you guys could introduce to the world, just a stand-up button that's like, these are similar products that might be relevant to you, and then there's a kickback for it or something, because it just feels like it's so difficult to go to market and penetrate certain markets that if someone has got, managed to get there, then bring others along for the ride, and it will pay dividends, both financially and maybe in other ways too. But I don't know. That's my dream of a future where maybe we're a little bit more harmonious when it comes to product. I don't know.
Do you think something like that needs to come from like the private sector, or do you think there needs to be sort of public sector support on something like that?
I think it has to be private. I think it has to be founders sitting down with founders and just going, do you know what? I love your product. our customers could probably, some of our customers could probably do with your product. Let's just create a little partnership and integration or something like that. Because I don't think, just saying open API and Zapier and all that is enough. Like, I think, it has to be, and we are starting to see it a little bit, but it's just a little bit more at the higher end. And I actually think there's a lot of utility in doing this at the lower end, at the earlier stage of startup, because quite often, as we know, the problem with early stage SaaS products is that they're not able to build the features that can offer the full value of their ultimate vision of the product because of time, money, resources. But if you can integrate different other products all at a similar level within it, then you can end up adding an enormous amount of value. And it could be like, just create a one membership kind of thing to get access to all these different tools. Like, there are ways of adding an enormous amount of value and almost outsourcing different feature sets and value propositions by creating some sort of coalition of SaaS products, as opposed to
absolutely
do everything.
I'll tell you what, Greg, you want to come on to start to stand up and do a talk on that.
I'd love to, yeah.
Yeah. Do a talk.
That's probably the extent of what I could say about it, because beyond it's beyond my technical abilities after that.
But you've also got a network, Greg, where you can pull it out there and maybe bring one or two others with you to talk about it. We'd definitely be up for that.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's start this movement. Yeah.
Well, it's very valuable, I think, because I think all of us can remember is when we've received services, advice, whatever it is, from another business, and they seem to be there to help you to solve your problems, to make things better, rather than just to sell you a particular product or service.
Right.
So it's that wonderful thing when somebody says, I know you want to buy XYZ from me, but having seen your business, and it's not really for me to say, but I think you'd find this work much better, but you also had, WXY.
Right.
And that's not actually provided by us, but we can help to introduce you for the people, and we can integrate and all that sort of thing. We all know that's absolutely marvelous when somebody's prepared to look at the issues you've got and make a bigger contribution than the one you've hired them for. That's absolutely fantastic. So I think that what you've been talking about, Greg, exactly, is to help people further, or to understand where you can bring allies alongside to increase your service, which may help them, popularize their business or products or whatever it is. It's a movement that would be great, but as you say, things often get in the way, whether it's egos, jealousy, or dare I say it, that awkward phrase, lawyers sometimes cause problems in these circumstances, but I'm sure we can overcome all of them.
Yeah, and also I think there's another practical element of this as to why I think about this a lot, which is the market itself, I think, is quite tired. As a CEO, I know, as I'm sure you do too, the amount of tools that you need to have in your tech stack is ridiculous to do any one given task. It's like, why can't more tools talk to each other? Why can't more tools do more things all in one? And why do I have to use that tool for just that one tiny thing, but then I have to go over here to use this, and I can't remember my password, and I've got to pay multiple subscriptions? And it's like there's got to be a better way. And I think what we're running the risk of within techs, startups especially in that ecosystem, is creating a fatigue where there's going to be a point where I think people are going to sort of go, do you know what, I'd much rather do it the old way, or a bad way, a less efficient way, because it's A, becoming too expensive, and B, it's just becoming too much of a pain to manage, right? That I think there's a lot of reasons why I've thought about this, and why I do make introductions between my clients. A lot of the clients I work with, if I can see that there are ways they can work together, I've already introduced them, and they are finding ways to integrate with one another, and this, that, and the other. And I think it is a good. Yeah, there's something to it, but I think it's going to take time. It feels like the natural progression from founders speaking to founders, learning from each other, to then go, well, let's just help each other in a much more real, sort of an official way, But who knows?
It goes back to what we said earlier, Greg, about being together takes us further.
Right.
Yeah, and I know in our own situation with these two members, both very experienced founders, I look at them both, look at what they're building and what they're creating. It's going to be wonderful. They stand a much better chance, I believe, of reaching success than they would if they went off and did it on their own.
Yeah. Well, a problem shared is a problem halved, right? And that's happening within your community that you've built when it comes to operationally, career-wise, and so on. But why not transfer that over to the literal problem the company is setting out to solve? You know,
absolutely.
That could actually go even further. You know, I like to dream of a utopia where, you know, at some point there's businesses that have, you know, 100 CEOs, because they're all so close-knit partnerships that they kind of all work to the same goal. Or maybe it's a bit of an odd dream. I don't know.
The only thing worries me about 100 CEOs working in partnership is ego.
See, that's why they have to be vetted by you first.
Yeah, lawyers, as Harry said, stuff around IP.
That's fine. Lawyers will be replaced by AI soon, so that's fine. So we've got that. We'll just have an AI that's a solicitor that just manages the whole lot. That's not a problem.
I'm told that one of the reasons there isn't an official collective noun for CEOs, so the ones that have been developed by various institutions are unsuitable for use in any circumstances. And you can believe that, because I don't know why, because often to the outside world, they're not necessarily the most popular band of people, but anyway, but they're often people who are striving and trying hard. They aren't necessarily their image of successful, adorned, worshipped, and privileged, but anyway.
And that's a really interesting thing to bring up, because I take huge issue with the way that the general population views entrepreneurship and CEOs. They seem to value entrepreneurship for some reason as a very separate thing, and there seems to be a large group of the world that seem to value that a lot. But for some reason, CEO, founder, carries a very different set of characteristics, that exactly what you mentioned there really troubles me. Like, you know, the demonization of CEOs, especially big tech CEOs. I don't abide by that. I don't understand. I understand the concerns maybe behind some of the power certain large organizations have, but I don't understand the demonization of CEOs and founders as a whole, given that these are some of the most brightest and intelligent individuals in our society. We should be, I think, very much revering them as people that are going to lead us into prosperity. Like you said at the beginning of the conversation, Ollie, you know, the cornerstone of our economy. I mean, why aren't we admiring them as much as maybe we should, or giving them the flowers as much as maybe we should?
What do you think motivates the demonization? What do you think's behind it?
Jealousy.
I think
and if them founders, do you think the founders change as they become more successful, as their businesses grow? Or do you think they still set out with the same leading principles, that they want to create value, they want to solve a problem, and all of the sort of traditional founder principles? Do the founders change?
I think society believes that they do, that money goes to their, and power goes to their head, and as a result they change, and then therefore their intentions become less well-meaning as a result, right? Like an evil villain origin story. But the reality is, if that were the case, you would be kicked out of your own company. In reality, right? So that cannot be the case. Yes, they have to become a lot more, maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot more cutthroat in order to survive a company that gets to scale like that, where you're dealing with, you know, a huge amount of shareholder pressure, investor pressure, board members, etc. Yes, maybe. But if your eye is off the ball in terms of vision and what you're looking to accomplish, and that key thing, that magic sauce that you had in the beginning, if that goes, you're out, you're replaced. So I don't believe that's accurate.
Yeah, I think we're not helped by the press or the media in general, understandably believe, whether they're right or wrong, that the best way to selling airtime, newspapers or whatever, is pointing out the mistakes, foibles, unpleasantries of these people. And And so that, again, I think leads to more intense jealousy, as you mentioned, Greg, because people may be in a position of jealousy anyway, because they see these people doing things, getting away with things, perhaps having a more materially beneficial life than the rest of us and that sort of thing, and they resent it. But then if the press then are specialized in pointing out things that these people have done wrong or foolish things that they've said, or particularly their ideas of superstardom and their ideas of favoring world domination, that sort of thing, they're going to be resented. And we all know there are some great entrepreneurs, and not take nothing away from their achievement, do believe that they should have the spotlight and maintain it most of the time. I think often at the peril of their own businesses, but however, that's what they want to do. And, if they're in a position to do that and nobody's going to restrain them, then they do it at their peril, I'm afraid.
Yes, and I do believe that you're right, because if they will fail by doing that. So that's what I mean by I think those that are continually finding success and growth are less likely to have those hidden secret motives. It's the ones that you see slowly start to decline, or sometimes very quickly decline, are the ones that were trying to take that approach and were very ego driven and so on. The world tends to find balance when it comes to those things, and that's usually through you can't be an arsehole for long. You get exposed. Like, eventually, this is my point. Like, it may start only in the boardroom, but very soon it will spread outwards. And then, of course, the market dictates whether or not you're still in your seat. So it doesn't take long to get outed. Even if you maybe started as a nice individual with the right intentions, if you become an arsehole, you'll be kicked out pretty quick. And I think that's what people fail to realize. It's like, if they're there, they're probably there for a reason. But I also think it's part of a larger issue as a whole in society that isn't anything new. People like to make it out like it is, but the whole of the eat the rich kind of us versus them mentality, which is where we encourage each other to get successful until we're successful. It's like it's a very odd thing, and of course millionaires are viewed as disgusting people just by the inherent fact that they're millionaires, with very little regard given as to how they got there, and also very little self-reflection taken into account as to the fact that most people would love to be millionaires too. So shut up, right? It's quite hypocritical. So I think it's part of a wider political identity politics-ish kind of problem. But
so the founder who has a reality check, they're in touch with all the sort of sensitivities, and they're willing to go and talk to the media about the early days, the amount of times they faced bankruptcy, the amount of times that the bank were willing to, call in a loan, the amount of times that they had key staff walk out the door, and it seemed easier at the time to, the media only want to sort of report on the demonization bit. But I think founders, and this is where I believe things like Startup to Stand Up, they can give you more grounding. Yeah, because you come into our meetings, you listen, and it makes you more humble and respect founders because of the personal risks and the sacrifices they make to get in there. And you name the top 10 founders all time. Every single one of them has faced jeopardy at some point or other. But that's not what we see. Right? We only see the sort of pool parties and Rolls Royces and Lamborghinis. Not why and how they got there. I think it's
but it's a double-edged sword as well, isn't it? Because you do also want to be somewhat aspirational, right? So it is a double-edged sword. It's like there is some utility in showcasing to some degree what you can achieve and what you can obtain through success to maybe get the attention of the younger audience, for example. but you then do need to temper that with, but here's, let me curb your expectations a little bit. Like, it took this a lot of work, which is why I think there's the separation between the admiration for entrepreneur versus founder. There seems to be a difference there. Entrepreneur seems to, for some reason, in the cultural zeitgeist, spell out hard work, grit, determination, struggle, then success, millionaire. Whereas founder, for some reason, makes people think of trust fund kids who just just incorporated a company and now they're suddenly millionaires and they have control over governments. Like, what? Where did that come from?
Yes, and I think there's another different attitude in the States, isn't it, Greg?
Right.
That there is more understanding and more support and indeed much more respect for, whether you want to call them founders, entrepreneurs, whatever, but wealth in general, or wealth generation is respected more. Whereas we often take a different view in Europe, and it's something we just have to overcome. But I still think there are just as many people here who want to make it and want to be successful and want their businesses to succeed, and their concerns about whether they're going to be looked at and whether people are going to make funny remarks to them once they become hugely wealthy and successful. I mean, it's not something we worried about too much when we were thinking whether we were going to be able to pay people on Friday, was it? I didn't remember thinking about it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think there's some? I mean, obviously now with social media being such an important part of a lot of the strategy for upcoming first time or even multiple time founders these days, especially when it comes to sort of building up a bit of an image and a brand, personal brand being an important thing, and especially when it comes to things like investor relations on LinkedIn and so on. Do you think that that's there's maybe like a missing piece that we're not giving to founders now in terms of how to curate that image that finds the right balance among the things we're talking about between authenticity, inspirational content, professionalism, like all these things? Do you think we're missing something there?
I think that's a good point, in that now we have to have, our business has to have a different face to the one it used to have before. Is now there's all the range of media, social media included, and again, it's a very interesting decision that entrepreneurs and founders have to make, because in some cases they may not be the best face or the best spokesman for their business, which is a difficult decision to make, and a brave one. Often that the most on the ball and the most perceptive often make that decision very well. But I think, as you say, if people take themselves through whatever kind of business education it might be, there is a little bit about how to present yourself, but I don't think there's anything on the sort of range you're talking about, Greg, and it's a good point. And again, another reason for putting yourself in a peer group, because they're often the first people to tell you, look, you're a wonderful person, you've got these huge skills, but are you actually the right person to be representing your business, to be the voice of your business in this case? And you don't have to be. A difficult conversation to have with anybody, but one that they would really value if it adds a lot to their benefit and their business's benefit.
And being able to articulate clearly, with not any industry buzz bullshit words, what your original motivations, values, and principles were. So we're doing this for the following reasons, and we continue to do it. And as we gain traction, as we become more bigger and able to support more people, we're going to invest even greater sums in providing solutions for this particular industry or sector going forward. Reminding people all the time why they started.
A friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the show and only takes a couple of minutes.
I also think a bit of honesty.
And talking about the ups and downs. Yeah. I know of a particular, quite famous London-based entrepreneur, extremely successful. And I always thought it was, too glossy, the way he presented himself. And then I see a YouTube video with him on, and he talked about warts and all. In the early stages, he got battered and bullied by the bank. Not to reasons why not to trust the banks implicitly. And I thought, wow, my whole view on this particular entrepreneur changed, because he was willing to be honest. And it goes back to that integrity, honesty, authenticity. It's like crazy important throughout the journey.
And I'd say that there's a certain amount of honesty as well, even from, if a founder is entering into a market because they want to capitalize on something and make a lot of money, be honest about it. Like, I don't actually see anything wrong with that as well. And there seems to be a tendency for them to want to almost create this faux authenticity of like, our mission statement is for X, Y, and Z, and we want to help X, Y, these communities. So it's like, if a business's number one priority is to make money, that is the main principle of a business. And I don't think that there's enough of that honesty out there as well. It's like, we're not just in this purely for altruistic reasons. We want to make money. We want to earn a living. We want to increase the quality of our lives. And yes, that may be a secondary or a primary goal or driving force, but it's still there, right?
The stigma around that. So Harry and I both were present. Remember the Simon Sinek talk, Harry, a few years back? And Simon said, and it stuck with me, this, we transferred the word profit for freedom. Yeah. So profit has got a stigma attached to it, the word. You think of like fat cats, you think of people who are maybe not paying the right amount of tax or whatever else. But Simon give it a different definition by saying it's freedom, or profit gives us the ability to produce more value for the consumer and do research and development that's required to make things better and employ more people, pay more tax, all of this type of thing. So just simply swapping the word profit for freedom or liberty. And I think it was a good way, the way Simon framed it. It changed a lot of perspectives in that day, because a lot of business owners, they're sort of afraid to show their net profit at the end of the year. They may prefer to show abbreviated accounts for whatever reason. They're worried the customers might see it, and they'll lose customers but that's only part of the story, Greg. A lot of them profits are sort of reinvested into the business to make the services and the products better for the customers. So, where are then customers going to go eventually? So it is a different way of framing things.
There are many. I noticed that there are many business leaders and entrepreneurs and founders who say, when they're asked about money, say money isn't important to me. Actually, not really what they mean when they're questioned. What they mean is that it's not my priority. It's not my motivation. Their motivation is the success of their business or their idea. But of course, very much part of that is the financial circumstances that come with that success. I think if you said to them, is money important to you? In the sense that, would you accept all the success your business, your product it has, provided it not provide you with any money, they might take a rather different view. It's just not quite their top of their list because they want that success. But if you tell them they still be living in a lean-to and find it difficult to go through little luxuries like eating and drinking, I think their view of money might change a bit.
Is that answer not also as a result of almost the cultural training to say that as almost like an automated response? Absolutely. To some degree? That if you were to just admit, money is important to me, you're automatically demonized. Whereas I just don't think that's true. And I also, or maybe it is true, but I just don't think it should matter. Because if you do get demonized for that, fine. Then those that are going to be supporting you are probably the people you want supporting you. Like, you know, as long as it's in there with the rest of your message, obviously. I don't think that's a bad message to put out to the world, and especially to aspiring young entrepreneurs and founders, to say that should be a very high, almost number one metric for you to be focused on. That while you may have a business idea that has high social impact or infrastructure impact or whatever it might be, that's great. You want to solve these very important problems for humanity and for society. Your business still needs to make fucking money. You still need to make money. Because the more comfortable you are, the more you can be focused, the more you can give to your community, to the world, the more innovative you can be. Your business should, number one focus should be making money, and you should prioritize that. I don't think there's anything wrong with putting that message out there. I really don't.
It's that freedom.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's a very good point, Ollie. It is a freedom because, as you say, is that it's interesting the amount of strange and inappropriate things that are being done in company ownership or whatever, where funny things have happened with the till and the accounts and whatever. It's often not because somebody is principally dishonest or whatever. It's just this sudden intense need for some money at some stage, which they're sure they can put right later, that then leads to all sorts of problems. But anyway, Greg, you're going to have to forgive me. I have a 12:30.
No, that's absolutely fine. It's been lovely having you jumping in, and we shall let you depart. But it's been lovely meeting you, and we shall continue the conversation on for the next half an hour, and hopefully we'll meet again soon.
Well, very good to meet you, and do hope to link up soon. And thanks, Ollie. And
Thanks,
we'll
Harry.
shortly. Lovely.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye. Yeah, lovely gentleman. I can see why you're co-founder.
Yeah.
How did you three meet? You mentioned there's three of you. So Gary, yourself, and Harry. So how did you all meet?
Well, I was fortunate enough that when I joined Vistage in 2015, 2016, Harry was the chair.
Right.
So he was. It's divided into business groups. They try to get an array of different sectors, non-compete, and he was the chair of our group. Our group, again, very fortunate, unbelievable people in our group, access to them, and Gary joined the group as well at a later stage, and then we're in there as these networks happen. You know, these peer-to-peer groups, so many good ideas come out, generate from these groups are unbelievable. And I think as well that people come along and get inspired. They get inspired, Gregory, and they look at people and they think, yeah, I could work with you, and we could do this together, and I could see it happening. And these groups are so needed. So that's how Harry, Gary, and I all met.
Right.
And we started this thinking that we were going to have just a small group of founders, no expectations around numbers, and it went bang. It's grown beyond expectation. It's grown by word of mouth. We don't, we do LinkedIn posts and stuff like that about our events, but we certainly don't advertise or promote it. It's all word of mouth. But I was going to say, for your audience, Gregory, and anyone out there listening to this today wants to come along, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or my email address or whatever. They can come in as our guest. I'll have a quick chat with them before, just a one-to-one, and then they can come in as a guest and test drive it themselves. They can see what we do. They can see what we're offering. They can meet the founders. They can meet the hosts, and they can test drive it themselves. And that's the best way, I think. Most people, they come in and they love it.
Yeah, and I can say, as someone who's been to one of your sessions, I can highly recommend to do exactly that. I mean, if you've got the opportunity to test drive something out, then why not, right? I think it makes absolute sense to do so. So yeah, with regards to Sorry to switch gears again to something you mentioned earlier about the future. You mentioned about this platform that, again, like we said at the release of this episode, hopefully will be up and running, and you're going to have a library there. I'm curious to know, are you going to be like, how are you building it? Like, who's building it? Because if I'm curious to know, get an idea of how it might work. Can you explain a little bit? Like, are you going to be able to search by specific topics, or are you going to, sort of be filtering through a library? Obviously, now with the tools that we've got, a full index. Brilliant.
Yeah, so all the members will be able to go a little bit like LinkedIn. You, as a member, you'll be able to go in there, put your bio in, put about you, what you've done in the past, key skills. You'll be able to message in between members. Goes on. We've got really active Start to Stand Up WhatsApp groups. We've got one in particular called LinkedIn Love that's going to be put onto the new the new platform. And how LinkedIn Love works: you're a founder, you're just about to launch a new product, or you're going live. You put a post out on LinkedIn. You go onto LinkedIn Love, say, I've just posted this, can I have some love shares and all of that? All of a sudden, you've got a whole community there. Very powerful. Really, really powerful. You get comments from everyone, and everyone gets involved. So that's going to be adopted onto the new platform. If, as well, we've got access to lots and lots of guest speakers, they will be given access to part of the platform where, if there is a demand from the members where they want a particular talk, guest speaker like yourself could come in and book that talk. It's all going to be done through the platform. So can't wait for this. It's really going to help us.
That's super exciting, yeah.
But it's just a couple. We've just launched Founder Focus. I don't know if you've seen any of that, but we're very fortunate that we've got Matt Mower and a guy called Tom Hadley, and they do a fireside chat with all of our members about the business, aspirations, what they're looking to do. It's a wonderful thing. We've just launched our latest episode of that, and that's really taken off. And we're going to be launching our business health check and aspirational list. So we say to every new member, if we gave you a magic wand, what would you want for you and your business, either in 6 months, within 6 months, or a year? And the member has to jot down what they're looking for. It's very powerful, that, because you can be as ambitious as you want, but jotting it down, talking about it, writing it, and we put members together as a buddy system and accountability,
right?
So they can talk to each other. What were your targets at Christmas? What are your targets for 24? They sit down every quarter or every 6 months together in their sort of accountability partnership, and talk about how they're doing, actual versus target.
Almost like a founder sponsor kind of thing. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the thing I see the most that a lot of my clients ask me for, is the founder clients I work with, is just keeping them accountable for stuff. They'll often ask me, like, we've agreed this set of things. Just, can you next month or next week, whenever we're going to meet, can you just kick me up the arse? Can you make sure? I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
But this is religious.
Yeah.
And it's as much about keeping to that target, keeping to that, promise to yourself and promise to your business. Writing it down. That magic wand. What do you want? Give me 2 things you want, Greg, for you and your business over the next 6 months, 12 months. You sit down and think about it, and you start writing it. It becomes almost achievable.
Yeah. It's similar to something that I recommend a lot of founders to do, is a founder diary. I tell people to do this a lot, that especially the founders I work with. I'll say to them, if you can, make the time to 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at the end of the day, just jot stuff down, like stream of consciousness stuff. It could be a to-do list, it could be bullet points, could be big goals, could be great idea, whatever. It could be just a summary, just a brief summary, a 1 sentence. What did you do today? Who did you speak to? What stuck out? And I tell people to do this on something like a Google Doc, because then it's indexable, it's searchable, right? You can use keyword searches, all this kind of stuff. And the benefits of that are astounding. There are many of them. Like, first, like you said, getting your thoughts out, incredibly important. Founders, as you know, people who have too many ideas in their heads, right? So that, number one, right, helps them sleep because they're out there. But then all of the other benefits are, especially early stage founders, that can be the basis of your operational playbooks, right? You can start pulling out of there. It's like, okay, I did this today with my first client, for example, my first customer. You know, this was how the onboarding call went. This is how my first sale went. This is how a call with the marketing agency went. And suddenly you're building to-dos, playlists on how to do these things for future staff and future senior people you have in your company. It's like
your manual.
It's your manual. It's the beginning of your manual. So you can branch it out into all these different things, as well as being cathartic. And on top of that, if that wasn't enough, as you know, you can run certain parts of that through ChatGPT and create content from that. So if it's like, this was my day, going back to the authentic thing, is that you're not going to remember the 1 million struggles you had last week, and you know, different problems you had to solve and fires you had to put out. But if you have a document that shows your thoughts and what you went through, you know, every day, you can turn that into a diary that can be shareable with people, and you've got a bit of behind the scenes content you can share. And I think that's a really powerful thing too, to put out to the world. So I strongly advise founders to do that as a practice. I think I even mentioned this when you asked me to join. I mentioned that as something, but it's worth repeating as an exercise to do.
Well, I'm definitely going to hold you to that. Come on and do a talk to the Stand-Up community.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
pooling your resources.
Yeah,
getting together.
Yeah, I can share my kind of crazy vision for it, and then it just, you know, it's out in the ether then, and then people can.
It's almost like an efficiency drive, isn't it?
Kind of, yeah. Just like, you know, being a bit more open to strategic partnerships maybe earlier on in the startup's life cycle than you would think, because that's quite often what people think of something to do later on when there's more resources and infrastructure. But I think actually it's very doable far earlier on. Yeah. Well, I'll be more than happy to. Really quickly as well, as we're sort of getting into the last quarter of an hour or so, do you do any in-person events, or are there plans to do any in-person events?
Yeah, we've done 2 this year already.
Okay.
And the last one was really good. That was a investor event with active angel investors, so the community come along, and we had a talk about term sheets and things to watch out for as a founder when you're thinking and preparing for investment. And we've got a number of different live events planned for later this year. We're being approached by lots of other types of founder groups, people who run things slightly different to us. They might do the pitch events, for instance. There's been an explosion in that. They'll come to us and we'll do a joint venture. We'll do a joint event. So we're doing lots of live events, and a lot's planned throughout 24 and 25 on that level.
That's brilliant. I'll have to try and get myself to some of those as well. That I always like a good in-person, especially if it's a good excuse to travel up to London and mingle. It's always nice. So yeah, it's a few hours away from me, but I like the excuse to drive up there and meet people. And there's lots of people I know there, so it's a good excuse then to meet up with them and catch up and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll have to keep an eye out for those. So typically what I like to do in sort of the last 15 minutes or so of these things is ask for my guests more, and I know we've kind of been speaking quite broadly around advice for founders and so on, but maybe being a bit more specific, especially as a lot of my audience tends to be quite early stage founders. Do you given your experience and the amount of founders you spoke to, do you have any sort of standout pieces of advice for early stage founders that have really either stuck with you, or that ones that you've heard from others, or that you have come up with yourself, that you think could be useful to share, given that there may be hundreds of them listening right now?
Got a checklist. Always have options. One in anything is a bad thing. So I don't know why, but over the last 10 years, less than the last year or so, there's been a real focus on fundraising. And sometimes when you look at it, Gregory, fundraising could be the most expensive way to finance a business. So there's lots of other opportunities without diluting your stake in the business, and different ways of doing it. So always look at options. Build on your community. What I said earlier about your network is your net worth. Very, very important, that. And always have people you can rely on to talk to, who, you know, are there in your best interest and best interest of the business, that you can talk to. That whole network is really important. Sales process. You know, we talk a lot about tech products, and I speak to a lot of tech founders. That all of the focus goes, all of the attention goes into the product itself, and then when you get to the selling bit, they think that a machine can do that as well. Often not the case. So
never the case.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm being polite.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's 3 things there I could go on. I've got lots of we've got lots of tips, but I think as well that when a member comes in initially and they get to know and learn and trust the founders community we built, that tribe for them, it's there for them, and they pick up different threads, different ideas, different conversations. They're getting wiser all the time. They're getting stronger. They're getting fitter. And in some instances, I've had guests come in and said, I found the whole experience quite uncomfortable, because I'm looking up to these founders and they're having these conversations, and it's, well, sometimes you've got to step out your comfort zone to grow. And that's really important. You know, that's so important. And they get that. It's like going to the gym, and putting yourself through all that, you know, jumping into that freezing cold water every morning,
right?
Or that cold shower. You don't want to do it. You do it because it's going to help you develop and grow. There's been some of that, and we've had reactions like that to some of the guest speakers we've had in. But then 2 months' time, 3 months' time, they're not saying that. They've got over the initial shock, and they're full in. It's like starting at the gym for the first time ever, and then it becomes religious, isn't it? It becomes a good habit.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. It's that exercise. Always wanting to improve your network, your opportunities, your development as a business leader, and to grow and develop your business. It's what it's all about. And sometimes you have to step out your comfort zone, you know. So but yeah, we love what we do, and yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. Growth is very rarely achieved in comfort, right? You know, like your analogy of the gym. Like it's not. You know, you don't necessarily need to go to pain, but certainly discomfort, right? That you need to be ideally going to failure at least, and then at failure, you know, you've worked that muscle to the point where you were to go any further, you're going to do a potentially irreparable damage or irreversible damage, but at least you've got to that point where you know you've made some progress. And that, you know, to take that analogy to its literal sort of endpoint, that it's a good analogy for that reason. Absolutely. And just to pick up as well on another thing you said about sales, I will sound like a broken record to anyone listening, because I say this almost every episode, but I strongly, firmly believe that the number one priority for any founder in terms of a skill to develop is the ability to sell, without question, I think. Because with that comes a lot of other things, but also there's a misunderstanding about what that means for a lot of founders, which is they think that it means a skill set that is kind of completely alien to them and very unique to a specific individual who built it over a period of a career, etc., like a salesperson. No, the ability to sell is very simple for me. It can be defined simply as being a highly proficient communicator who has the ability to communicate more than anything else their vision. That's all it is. That is a salesperson. You know, that's what it is. It's, you know, it's being aspirational, rallying people behind your mission, your goal, you know, and letting the other people buy into your vision. That's what it is. People will give you money after that, or they'll join your company. Or
how good are you? How good are you at amplifying and articulating that?
Right.
Yeah. Do you want to get better? Do you want to build relationships that are going to enhance your business and your business life experience? You know, where are you going to build them relationships?
Well, and the answer to that is you can always get better. Even if you think that you are excellent at communicating your vision and your passion and everything like that, like say on stage or on podcasts or to clients or to investors or whatever, the fact is you can always improve. You can always be better at communicating that vision. And it's just like you said, you know, believing that you're fantastic at something is the moment that you're probably going to start failing, you know, because you've never nailed it, because the market will change, your product will change, your board's intentions will change, like, everything will change. So you need to constantly stay up to date and continually improve that, right?
And something else that a lot of founders overlook: enjoy it. Enjoy it. And
I'm glad you said that.
Don't forget the reasons why you wanted to do this in the first place.
Oh, 100%.
Apart from all of the bringing joy to people and creating jobs and being a positive contributor to the wider society and the economy.
Have fun.
Yeah. Enjoy the freedom, and don't lose sight of that. You know, enjoy it.
Yeah.
You're not reporting to XYZ or a board or you know, when you set off. Master your own destiny. And there are a lot of people, and I think you touched upon the jealousy bit of that earlier, from the sort of the population jealous about certain entrepreneurs, but they're also not just jealous about the money and the material trappings. They're also jealous maybe about the freedom they've got, the fact they haven't, you know, their weeks, their structure's very different.
Which is also in some ways not true, because if some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world have the highest amounts of pressure from some very, very powerful and influential people, right? So it's actually not entirely true. It's actually in the early to mid stages where you have the most freedom.
It's how the media reports.
Not at all. Not at all. You can't just do what you want when you're the CEO of a company on the stock exchange, right? You have a lot of people to answer to. You know, you're not self-employed. Not at all. Anything completely further from it. You have probably more freedom,
but still enjoy it.
Yeah. Because that was the goal, right?
Yeah, and always be willing to talk about it and show your enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and we regularly go over these things as well. So that was a very good point, Gregory, about top tips for founders. Awesome point.
Good. Well, look, let's wrap it up there. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and thanks for getting Harry to jump on as well. And do send my regards to Gary. I hope he feels better. And we're always in touch anyway. But let me know about this thing. I'll be happy to help out, and anything else that I can help.
Well, I think you come up with a brainwave today that I feel we can look into a bit closer, and maybe use stuff to stand up as a test bed for that.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we've got the people, we've got the resource and everything else for that to happen. So I'd love you to come in, maybe one or two others as well, who share that and share that idea and how it could be done. Let's talk about it.
Sounds
I
good.
think that's fabulous. And anyone watching today, if you want to come along, my email address is ollie@startuptostandup.com. Contact me on LinkedIn and come in as a guest, because we want people to benefit from the community, and we want people to see the importance in network. Network is everything.
Absolutely. And I'll put all of those links in the description of the episode for anyone looking for them. So it'll all be there. So all that's left to say is thanks so much. Have an amazing day, rest of the week, etc.
I enjoyed this. It's fantastic, Greg. Loved it. So keep it up. Keep it coming.
I will.
You're doing a fantastic job. All right.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Have a great one, and we'll catch up again soon. Take care.
Thanks, mate. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Please like and subscribe and join in the conversation in the comments below.